You're standing in a checkout line doing quiet math in your head before the total even hits the screen. Maybe you're wearing the same jacket you've had since before your last raise. Maybe your car is 7 years old and still runs just fine. If a coworker walked past you right now, they'd probably assume you're just getting by, same as everyone else. But here's the thing, nobody around you would guess. You might already be ahead of most of the country financially and just not know it yet. Not because of some big win, not because of a secret, because of 9 quiet signs. And whether you're already living most of them or just starting to build them, both of those are good places to be standing right now. Today I'm walking you through those 9 signs, one at a time, slowly enough that you can actually check yourself against each one instead of just nodding along. And the 9th one isn't just another item on the list. It's the thing that quietly proves why the first 8 matter at all, whether you're 5 for 5 right now or 0 for 5 and just getting started. Sign 1, you have an emergency fund, even a modest one. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need 6 figures sitting in a high-yield account earning you bragging rights at dinner. It just needs to exist, untouched, waiting for your landlord raises the rent without warning, or a doctor's visit turns into something more expensive than you planned for. And if you don't have one yet, or it's smaller than you'd like, that's not a red flag. That's just where you are on the timeline, because every single person with a fully funded cushion started at exactly 0. What matters is whether it's growing, even slowly, even $50 a month. The people quietly doing well financially rarely look like it, because real peace of mind doesn't photograph well. Nobody posts a screenshot of a savings account just sitting there, boring, doing its job. Sign 2, if your car broke down tomorrow, you wouldn't need a credit card to fix it. You'd just pay for it and move on with your week without the sick feeling in your stomach most people get when a bill shows up out of nowhere. That feeling, that little jolt of dread when your phone buzzes with a number you didn't expect, is worth paying attention to, because it's telling you something real. If your bills or your bank statements regularly surprise you, that's not a character flaw, and it doesn't mean you're bad with money. It just means your money and your awareness of it have quietly drifted apart somewhere along the way. And the good news is that gap closes faster than people expect, usually within a few months of just paying attention. Sign 3 is the one almost nobody checks, mostly because it means comparing 2 numbers most people would rather not look at side by side. Your savings are actually bigger than what you owe on a credit card. If that's not true for you right now, you are nowhere close to a loan. And it doesn't mean you're behind in some permanent way. Plenty of people who are doing genuinely well today were on the other side of that equation not long ago. They remember exactly how that felt, that low hum of anxiety every time a statement arrived, the quiet dread of doing the mental subtraction before even opening the envelope. Nobody fixes it overnight, and there's rarely one dramatic moment where everything turns around. It's just a matter of not letting the gap get wider, 1 month at a time, until eventually the numbers flip, without you even noticing the exact day it happened. That's usually how it goes. The turning point rarely announces itself. You only recognize it looking back. Sign 4, you're living below what you earn, not because you're depriving yourself of everything you enjoy, but because your spending simply hasn't kept pace with your raises. And here's something worth sitting with, because it applies to almost everyone watching this, no matter how much they make. Even people doing objectively well rarely feel like it. I once heard about a man worth over $100 million who, at lunch with his equally wealthy friends, casually said, "I'm the poorest one here." He wasn't complaining, and he wasn't fishing for sympathy. He was just being honest about something psychologists call social comparison, the tendency we all have to measure our progress against the people closest to us instead of against any real external number. It never fully goes away, no matter how much you accumulate. There's always someone in your circle with a bigger house, a newer car, a flashier vacation photo, and your brain will quietly use them as the ruler, no matter how well you're actually doing. So if you're doing better than you give yourself credit for, or even if you're not sure where you stand at all, you're in surprisingly good company. Even 9-figure guys feel behind sometimes. That feeling isn't proof that something's wrong with your finances. It's just what being human feels like. Now here's what I want you to hold on to for a minute, because it's going to matter more than it sounds like right now. There's a 9th sign coming, and it isn't just the last item on a list you'll forget by tomorrow. It's the thing that quietly explains why the first 8 even work in the first place, why some people build wealth almost without trying trying while others do everything right on paper and still feel stuck. And it applies just as much if you're only 1 or 2 signs in as it does if you're already living all 9. So stay with me. Sign 5, your net worth is trending upward over time, even if it isn't a straight line. Some months it might dip because the market had a rough stretch, and that's not a setback worth panicking over. The comparison that actually matters isn't this month against last month. It's where you are now against where you were 2 or 3 years ago, because month-to-month comparisons lie to you. They make normal volatility feel like failure. The multi-year comparison is the only one that tells you the truth about whether you're moving in the right direction. And if you've never actually looked back that far, that alone might change how anxious you feel the next time you check an account balance. Here's a question worth sitting with before we go further. When was the last time you actually looked back 3 years instead of 3 weeks? Most people never do. They're too busy reacting to this month's number to notice a slower, steadier trend quietly working in their favor underneath it. That gap between what you're anxious about and what's actually happening is bigger than most people realize, and it's going to come back around before we're done here. Sign 6. You're contributing to a retirement account, even irregularly, even a small percentage some months when things are tight. It's not glamorous. Nobody posts about their 401k the way they post about a new car. But every dollar you redirect there is a gift to a version of yourself 10 or 20 years from now that you'll never meet but are building anyway. If you haven't started yet, starting this month with almost nothing still counts, because the habit matters more at first than the amount ever will. Sign 7, you've raised your contribution rate at some point without anyone pushing you to do it. You got a raise, felt the very normal pull to upgrade your life to match it. A nicer apartment, a nicer car. The things that seem to naturally follow more income. And instead you sent a slice of that raise further back instead of further out into your lifestyle. It rarely feels like a big decision in the moment. That's exactly why so few people do it, and exactly why it counts so much when you do. If your next raise hasn't happened yet, you already know what to do with a piece of it before it even arrives. Sign 8, you manage the debt you do have without missing payments or quietly dreading the due date every month. You don't need to be debt-free for this one to count, because pretending debt doesn't exist never changes the balance. What matters is whether you're steadily shrinking it or ignoring it the way people ignore a check engine light they've decided not to think about. There's a real difference between having debt and being ruled by it, and that difference has almost nothing to do with the size of the balance and everything to do with whether you're looking at it or looking away from it. Sign 9, the one I told you would rewrite the rest. Remember that question from a minute ago about the last time you looked 3 years back instead of 3 weeks. All 8 of those signs share one thing underneath them that never gets its own line on the list, and it's this. None of them come from a single decision made once, and none of them show up on a weekly or even monthly view. They come from doing something small and unremarkable, over and over, quietly, long after the moment feels significant, until it stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like identity. That's the part nobody can shortcut, and it's also the part that means it's never too late to start, because identity is built one repeated choice at a time, not in a single afternoon. You can't buy your way into it, and you can't fake it for a highlight reel, because it only shows up after years of nobody watching. Years where the only audience for your good decisions was you. So picture yourself back in that checkout line, doing quiet math nobody else can see. Whether you recognized 4 of these signs in your own life or barely one, the direction you're facing matters more than the exact count today. You don't wake up one day financially fine. You become someone for whom these 9 things are just normal. The way brushing your teeth is normal, long before the bank balance actually catches up and shows it on paper. And that becoming starts with the very next decision in front of you, not with some perfect version of yourself you haven't built yet. Here's what I want to leave you with, because it's the piece that makes everything else on this list actually hold together. None of it works if there's no cushion underneath it, because one bad month with no cushion can undo years of good ones in a single afternoon. That's exactly why my next video looks at how a completely different country handles this problem, because the Japanese approach to emergency funds works in a way that almost nobody in America ever tries, and it might change how you think about your own cushion completely. I'll leave it right there. See you in that one.